Happy Aloha Friday. Happy Aloha Friday, everyone. It's January 30th, and this is the first Climate Change Commission meeting for the City and County of Honolulu for 2026. So I'm really glad to see everyone. Cross, can we start roll call, please?
Yes, Chair. Your roll call is as follows. Chair Islam,
Present.
Vice Chair Otsuka,
Present.
Commissioner Romine,
Present.
Commissioner Olson,
Present.
and Commissioner Ma.
Commissioner Ma is absent.
Oh, Cross, if you're
Look,
speaking, you're on mute.
I'm so
Oh, I just saw
sorry.
you unmute.
yeah,
That's okay.
I don't know what happened. Did Commissioner Ma respond?
Commissioner Ma is not present, so she is
Okay,
absent.
great.
Cross, thank you.
During her absence. Thank you, Chair. You have quorum.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to our third agenda item, which is review and approval of our December 4th, 2025 meeting minutes. That was included in the board packet. Has everyone had a chance to review? Any questions, comments, clarifications, or changes? Great. I think the office did a great job summarizing our first in-person meeting as a commission and with the office, so thank you again. Hearing no changes, revisions, or clarifications, could I get a motion, please?
I will move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second?
Second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Romine. All in favor, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye. Okay.
Aye.
Group motion carries. Meeting minutes for December 4th, 2025, excuse me, are approved. Okay, moving along. We are going to hear our first report of the year from Director Fox for our Chief Resiliency Officer, excuse me, from the Office of Resiliency, Sustainability, and Climate Change. Director Fox.
Mahalo, Chair. Bilina mai ke komikina alolianiao ke Aloha Fox for the Resilience Office. With our time today, I'll share 6 brief updates on our office activities as we closed out 2025, and we've already kicked off the calendar year 2026. So to begin, I'll ground the Resilience Office in my new role as Kahu'ololoa and the Chief Resilience Officer, and offer an Olelo no Eau to help guide our work throughout this year. And it's drawn from the Mo'okuauhau of Ali'i lineages like Ma'ili Kukahi and Kukani Loko and Kakuhi have and ultimately leadership legacies that continue to really draw and inspire inspiration to my work, and why I'm very honored to be in this position now. So the Olelo no Eau I offer for 2026 is He lani I luna honua I lalo, a proverb and a saying that really draws upon the inspiration of the heavens above and earth below, when Oahu's leaders ensured that the fertility and the abundance of the uplands was directly connected to our ability to thrive along coastal waters. And I hope that that's something that each one of us can reflect and resonate with as we go through our journey together for a very busy 2026 season. I'm also happy to be able to welcome other team members who are with us and joining on the call. The Resilience Office is very excited to welcome 2 new fellows, our Resilience Office fellow, Caitlin, and our new Po'okela fellow, Samantha. They've joined the team in the past couple of weeks, and we're very excited to have them. And they'll be working on our communications and outreach program and our food sustainability and food security work. And so Caitlin and Samantha will be team members that everybody will be interfacing with. We also are recruiting for 2 full-time positions. I'm happy to say that we have both the Deputy Director position and the Climate Champions Coordinator positions opened. Applications for both of these are open for the next couple of weeks, so we encourage interested applicants who want to join us full-time in this important work, learn more about the positions, and you can apply at resilientoahu.org/opportunities. The third update is to thank our team, Sarah, Chloe, and Matt, who have been helping to lead open houses for the updates to FEMA's flood insurance rate maps. They have helped multiple city agencies, state agencies, and federal experts provide in-person and virtual open houses for the local flood insurance rate map updates that we call FIRM. These are new regulatory requirements that will take place on June 10th, 2026. And so we have a number of materials that have been recorded and updated and documented. And so we encourage everyone to visit resilientoahu.org/getfloodready to learn more, get prepared, and of course, feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions on the FIRM updates and your properties. Next, we've kicked off a summer fun curriculum in partnership with the Department of Parks and Recreation, and we want to thank their leadership for this collaboration to develop a lesson plan and curriculum that will help introduce Keiki to Aina-based resilience through a four-part lesson plan progression centered on summer fun. Many of us have fond memories of what summer fun looks like here on Oahu. It's something that most people have interacted with at some point, enrolling 10,000 keiki across the island for 7 weeks. The program that DPR is working with on CCSR will support keikis 6 to 12, and they will be taught by junior leaders ages 12 to 17 to create meaningful peer learning. We were able to kick off this new collaboration with 400 city park and maintenance employees, hear from them, and start to generate strong excitement of how we can activate public spaces focused on Aina, food, and community. These lessons will kick off in June this year, and we hope to expand it in future summer fun opportunities. The fifth area is an opening for requests for ideas. Youth-led organizations and institutions, we have the potential to think about what a youth-led climate fund would look like here at the city. The city is proud to have applied to Bloomberg's Youth Climate Fund to support youth-driven solutions for Oahu young people ages 15 to 24. We anticipate that if we were to get this award, we would be able to provide microfunds to about 25 directly youth-led projects of what do they see as important for investing in their time and energy across Oahu. And while a fund is not yet confirmed and submitting ideas is not guaranteed for selection, this form will help us gather the data and the information we need to make sure that we're understanding community-based ideas. The form is on our website at resilientoahu.org/get-involved. It will be open through February 22nd, 2026, and we encourage our commissioners and the public to help us spread the word so that we can hear from youth, community-based organizations, hui, schools across Oahu to see how we can make this a potential reality. And we've looked back on a number of things in 2025 to help us gear up for 2026. What you'll be hearing from us throughout the year will be honoring community commitments through the adoption of the city's next 5-year climate action plan update. We'll be engaging with community to develop and adopt the city's first ever Oahu Food Systems Plan. We'll be reactivating and advancing our Climate Champions program. We'll continue to advance the electrification of the city's fleet. We'll be administering the 4th year of our Better Buildings benchmarking program, and we're really excited to kick off an inaugural round of fully evaluated FY27 Climate Resiliency Fund projects with the support of our mayor and administration and the adoption of the City Council. In closing, Chair and Commissioners, mahalo for the time and your continued commitment and service to us. We look forward to working with all of you in a sincere, wonderful beginning into 2026. I'm open to any questions or follow-up at this time.
That was a wonderful update and report, Director Fox. I really love this opening proverb and inspiration for the year. So thank you. I don't have any questions, but I just want to comment. I love the focus on keiki. Really excited to hear about the collaboration with the parks and the summer fun curriculum, and especially just this generation of ideas for a youth-led climate fund. So it's really exciting. Really happy to share that and spread that word. So thank you again for sharing it. Great news. Commissioners, any questions, comments? Commissioner Osuga.
Hi, Director Fox. I'll start by echoing the chair's comments about the collaboration with Keiki. I am a alum of a DPR Summer Fun program, and I think I would have loved to have had more climate-focused, climate-oriented activities and educational opportunities. So I'm really excited that you're doing that. My only question for you was, you had mentioned the Climate Coordinators Program and the Deputy Director position. I'm assuming that means then the Climate Resilience Fund Program Manager position is closed and that's sort of moving along nicely? Okay,
Yes, the position is closed for that one, and the only two open positions at present are the Deputy Director and the Climate Champions Coordinator.
great. Okay, thank you. Great report as always. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And just like you, Vice Chair Otsuka, I want to highlight both Jason and Emily, who also have fond memories of Summer Fun, and both of them were junior leaders and were able to share their own personal connection and story with our DPR team.
Okay, Commissioner Romine.
Thank you, Director Fox, those updates. Really appreciate it. I also enjoyed the beginning with the Olelo no Eau, so thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah, I want to welcome Caitlin and Samantha to the team. Thank you for that update. Yeah, thanks for the reminders about the recruiting for the Deputy Director position, Climate Champions position, lead position there. Also the flood resilience outreach and the firm updates, as well as the call for youth-led climate projects. If it would be helpful, I'd be happy to reshare those, amplify those through our Sea Grant networks, if some of which we may have already, but happy to check on those. I think that's all, but yeah, thank you again for the updates.
Thank you, Commissioner Romine. Yes, please do share. Maya's dropping the links into the chat for commissioners and the public. And we'll also make sure we follow up with commissioners with those links via email, so you can forward them on easily to your networks.
Great.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Director Fox. Any questions, comments from the public before we close this item? Okay, seeing none, and Cross, just want to confirm, any questions or comments from Facebook?
No, Chair.
Great, thank you so much. Again, thank you again, Director Fox. We look forward to continuing to collaborate with the office. We're going to move on to our new business. Oh, yes, Fox, your hand is up. Cross.
Oh, apologies, Chair. I just wanted to confirm we have 3 people in person in the room, but none of them have questions.
Okay, thank you, welcome. Okay, we're going to move on to agenda number 5. And I'm going to actually turn it over to Vice Chair Otsuka to do the introductions.
Yeah, hello, everybody. I just want to very quickly introduce our next speaker and our next agenda item. So our next agenda item is a presentation on City Council Bill 78 from last year, 2025. It is a parking reform and parking management bill, and presenting today is Max Kalhammer. Max is the Parking and Curb Management Coordinator and is also the branch chief of the Business Development and Services branch. Max, I think you mentioned you might have some other colleagues joining you, so if you would like to go ahead and start and introduce anybody else that's joining you, that would be great. So thanks, Max.
Thank you, Vice Chair Otsuka. Yes, I do have with me in person Becca Steinhauer, who's our TDM program project manager. And I think virtually we have Ian Crittenden, who's our assistant chief planner in Transportation Performance and Development at the Department of Transportation Services. Are we ready to hear about Administration Bill 78?
Yes. Are you sharing screen, or is it?
Yes, Vice Chair. We will be
Okay,
sharing.
just
One
making sure.
moment.
Confirming I can see the screen. Hopefully you can too, Max.
I can.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Cross. Hello, everyone. It's a real honor to, my name is Max Calhammer, once again from Department of Transportation Services. It's a real honor to be presenting to you, commissioners, and Chair Islam about, and any members of the public about Public Parking Update Administration Bill 78, 2025. So you might have noticed in recent years how all of our parking meters have been upgraded. They've undergone a technological upgrade that allows those meters to collect data. And the main thrust of Bill 78 is to be able to leverage that data to implement two new parking pricing structures for on-street and off-street parking. So when we're talking about leveraging data, we're talking about the sensors in those meters that don't collect private information, but they just collect occupancy data, which allows us to manage parking. And so the Bill 78, the main feature of the bill that's expected to drive sustainability, pun intended, is a proposed progressive parking pricing structure for our roughly 3,600 on-street public metered spaces and a separate but similar model for our 3,900 off-street paid public parking stalls. But to be clear, for our on-street spaces, a new $4 per hour price floor in areas or on street segments would only be achieved with a 25 cent per hour increase each quarter from today's rate if occupancy data allows or warrants such an increase. Likewise, a 25 cent decrease would also be allowable because of our data collection and analysis. So for the off-street parking, the price floor that we would want to achieve based on these incremental changes would be $2 per hour, and the ceiling for that price would be $8 per hour.
Max, can I interrupt you really quick?
Sure.
I think you want to go to past your title slide, is that right?
I was just kind of queuing it up because I didn't really have that pricing structure in any of the slides.
Okay.
But I'm now,
Sorry about that.
I am trying to, no problem. I'm trying to
Yeah.
advance the slide now.
Okay,
perfect.
perfect.
Okay. So before I talk about the goals of the bill, I wanted to show you two images that kind of, they are the physical manifestation of what we're trying to achieve. The difference between these two images in terms of how full the parking is the kind of like what we are after with Bill 78. So the bill's goals are to increase paid public parking turnover and access. You want to make parking more available and easier to find when you need it. And we want to reduce the phenomenon of cruising for parking. And we want to raise more revenue from users of paid public parking. And that would fund facilities improvements and making them more sustainable. And perhaps most importantly for the commission is we want to see more sustainable travel choices as a result of these two new pricing structures. And the way we would achieve that specifically is, like I was describing, the adjustable parking rates. They're also called variable parking rate, or not adjustable parking rates. And then the secondary street parking rates would allow users to pay less in low demand periods. And then the variable rates would make users pay more for longer stays. So it's kind of reinforcing that turnover goal that we have. So what are the environmental benefits of all of these proposals within the bill? I'm not going to go through every single one of the proposals in the bill, but just to summarize, what the benefits would be from all of them is that we would want to reduce the cruising and greenhouse gas emissions. Cruising can account for over 50% of traffic. We want to lower the criteria air pollutants, the particulate matter and the NOx, and we want to reduce vehicle miles traveled. It's been studied that a 10% increase in parking rates, if justified, can reduce parking demand by 3 to 5% and encourage other mode choices. We also want to mitigate urban heat island effects. I'll stop for any questions about those benefits. And if I can, I will also just try to talk a little bit more about them. So in terms of like the specific quantifiable environmental benefits for our jurisdiction, if the actual VMT impacts of these proposed parking pricing structures are observed and estimated over time, that is the reduced VMT from cruising or parking and the effects on travel mode share. The traditional methods of calculating greenhouse gas emissions, for example, would apply. So your average passenger car emits approximately 400 grams or almost 0.9 pounds of carbon dioxide per mile. So if we know that the parking pricing is having an influence on VMT and we can estimate that, then we can quantify the specific environmental benefits from that. In terms of goal number 3 of affecting more sustainable mode choices, we can see through these images that we've had a chronic issue. These are, taken decades apart, all 3 of these images about single occupancy vehicle travel on the island of Oahu. And what we're hoping to achieve through the parking pricing is the same as what a congestion pricing model would do. It would make people think about alternative forms of transportation. We've all seen and heard what congestion pricing is done in New York City. We're not saying that our parking pricing structure is congestion pricing, but it has the same effect if the occupancy data allows us to increase those rates over time. And we don't expect those rates to go up that quickly, but it would take years for us to reach the ceiling for each one of those pricing models for on-street and off-street parking. But in the meantime, Skyline is going to extend to Kaka'ako all the way from Kapolei. And we're hoping that travel mode choices will increase people's or residential mode share split. We would also like to point out that in the Bill 78 preserves and allows for enhanced designated parking for carpools and van pools and reduced parking rates for carpools. So not only do we change the parking pricing structure for single occupancy vehicles, but we change it more favorably for carpools and van pools. And we also want to prioritize parking for such in our city garages, but also in our park and rides. So just to summarize, thank you very much for allowing us again, but our bill wants us to enhance the availability of parking, increase turnover, and which in turn is a reflection of reduced vehicle miles traveled. And we would also be able to fund facilities improvements that are also sustainable changes to our very well located and valuable properties. And we would really appreciate the commission's consideration of support for Bill 78. Thank you. Take any questions at this time.
Great, thanks, Max. Melanie, did you want to facilitate Q&A from the commissioners and the public, or did you want me to do it?
You can do it if you would like. Yeah.
Sure, yeah. I'll start with if there's any questions from the commissioners, and then I'll ask for questions from the public. So questions from the commissioners for Max and some of the other DTS staff here. Commissioner Romine.
Thank you for that overview, Max. Really appreciate it. A couple just clarification questions from my own knowledge. I think you said this bill would set a floor of $2 per hour parking rate and $8 max per hour. Did I catch that right?
You did for off-street parking, yes.
For off-street, okay. And then you had the interesting kind of finding that a 10% increase leads to a 3 to 5% decrease in demand. I just wondered what that $2 to $8, how that compares to current rates. What's the current parking rate? I don't really pay attention really well when I'm paying a meter, I gotta admit. What kind of percent increase are we looking at with those numbers?
Thanks for your question, Brad. So for off-street parking, it varies from facility to facility, and that's one of the things that Bill 78 tries to make more consistent and consolidates it into one rate structure. We have tables in the current ordinance that are very specific about what the rate is, but it varies between 75 cents an hour and $1.25 an hour off-street. And for on-street, where we're proposing to eventually achieve a $4 per hour price floor, the on-street in most locations, except for the downtown area near Honolulu Hale, is $1.50 per hour. And we that represents more than 100% increase, about 150% increase, but not right away. Like I said, we want to do it incrementally. And what would that do for demand? We're not sure that 25-cent increases will start to affect demand in the near term, but as those quarters go by and the occupancy data warrants more 25-cent increases, I think as you approach $3 or $4 an hour, you are going to start to see an impact on greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle mode share.
Great. Thank you for that explanation, Chair. I see your hand up. Do you mind if I ask one more question while I'm unmuted here? Thank you. Does this ordinance that only applies to? Does it also apply to county parks? Any paid parking in there, or park and ride sites, or are those in separate ordinances?
A lot of our county parks and our beach parks and our nature preserves and our park and rides are currently free. And this bill focuses mostly on existing paid public parking. It doesn't authorize us to expand parking meters. The Department of Transportation Services already has that authority, but we haven't expanded parking meters on island except for on Eisenberg Street and A'ala Park in the last 20 years. And that's not the main focus of this bill. So those parks are, they're likely to stay the way they are, but of course, as time goes on, we're always monitoring the situation. And the Department of Transportation Services would need to work with Parks and Recreation in order to do that.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, to be clear, I wasn't suggesting,
Yeah.
increased paid parking in parks, and paid parking for park and ride could be counterproductive, but it just helps me to know where those live in the ordinances. So thank you. That's all. Appreciate it, Max.
Melanie,
you.
Chair Islam, before I call on you, I just wanted to make a note that sort of relates to Brad's question and also Hi'i's question in the chat. So Max, places like Hanauma Bay, right? I think are city, technically a city and county nature preserve. And I believe that if you don't have a Hawaii state ID, you have to pay for parking in that park, for example. And I think you don't have to pay for parking if you have a Hawaii state ID, and then I think maybe a military ID. I can't remember quite exactly what the rules are. But I think there are examples, I guess, of kind of these really high demand areas, whether to East Point, more tourism oriented parks or spaces. I think there's precedence for that, especially if there is an issue with not enough parking, but we don't want to take up more natural space or more like pave more of what I always say, pave more of paradise to accommodate storage for vehicles. So I think there are examples on Oahu, and there's some really interesting examples, I think, more with state parks that I've seen, especially on Kauai. But I think to Max's point, it's, I think, a collaboration between you folks, Max, DPR, and then I think in the case of Hanauma Bay, probably, I think Sea Grant, Brad, maybe is involved with Hanauma Bay in some capacity. I don't know if parking is involved, but probably across collaboration between different departments and organizations. Did you want to add anything, Max, to that? Or correct it if I said anything erroneous?
No, I think it's good commentary and good
Yeah.
context for the bill. I mean, there are other destinations that could probably would justify more parking demand management. And I'm not just saying pricing, but that's something that we all need to work together on, especially since there's multiple agencies involved, and we're in favor of it, and we can certainly have more discussions about it. But yeah, we're trying to just focus on existing metered parking for Bill 78.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Chair Islam, did you have a question or comment?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair Suga. I just had two more clarifying questions, Max. For the on-street parking, do you guys see any with the sort of the standard and the variable rate varying between neighborhoods based on sort of parking demand that you currently gather from your data? Or do you see a generalization happening across all the neighborhoods? It's more of a curiosity question.
Thank you for that question. So I didn't go into detail about how the adjustable rates would work. And the data can be broken down by area or street segment even, so that we can adjust rates or we can do those 25-cent increases at different rates based on the data. Like if they justify it every quarter, then we would likely increase it every quarter. But we can do it by street segments, by areas, like in our back office system right now for our sensors, we have 19 different areas that cluster all of our parking meters into groups of, like, say 200 or 300 meters, like Kailua, Kaimuki. And it's likely that we'll look at it at the area level first as like a first cut, and then drill down and be more specific about where demand is higher because of businesses, and special events, attractors, things like that, so that we're getting it right and we don't need to we don't need to generalize too much about these rates within the overall parking structure.
Great. That makes sense. You know, that will probably also help to lead to other sort of transportation solutions, right? To those areas that have high demand.
Yeah.
My second question was more of a clarification for off-street parking related to the van and the carpool. I know right now with the multimodal LEO provisions, it does say that it's encouraged, but it's not required. So I'm assuming through this bill, you would start to introduce and convert standard stalls to carpool and van pool stalls. And then I'm curious if that will lead to parking requirements for carpool and van in non-public off-street parking areas. Because that's where you would then start to see maybe some broader impacts, right, of reducing that single vehicle drive time.
Yes. So to the first part of your question, we would be very keen on designating more carpool and vanpool as demand presented itself, but also, to encourage demand, we are writing these provisions in the bill so that we affect that demand. So it's kind of a cart before the horse thing, and we have to just kind of play it by ear, because parking at park and rides and parking in our garages is much more of a premium than, say, parking at one of the parks in the center of the island. And we just need to optimize the parking the best way we can, if that makes sense. What was the second part of the question?
I was just curious if, and I think it is a cart before the horse type of thing, test to see, right? If increase of carpool and van stalls will make it, impact, right, on reducing the number of vehicles. If that then would translate to an actual LEO impacting parking requirements, stall requirements when you build new buildings, you do large renovations. Yeah.
Yes. So the answer is yes, and we would think that our other departments that are more directly in control of those regulations, or that maintain and manage those types of projects, like the TOD projects and any large development, they look at it from the perspective of the ratios of units. But I think because of the push for vanpool and carpool, that we can encourage it by having TDM, transportation demand management, incentives for doing so, and that we always promote it when they put together their transportation management plans that they submit to Department of Design and Construction. I mean, Department of Planning and Permitting. Excuse me.
Great. Thank you,
Yeah.
Max. Thanks for answering my questions.
For sure.
Commissioner Olson, I saw your hand up, but you also put it down. Did you want to ask a question or provide a comment?
No, it was resolved. Thanks.
Okay, excellent. Any more commissioner questions or comments before I go to the public? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to start with Hii Sanchez's comment in the chat. Max, I think you can also see it, but I'm going to read it out loud because we do have some folks in the room and for folks watching on Facebook Live. So Hii says, how do you believe visitors and their driving behaviors, like choosing private car rentals, are being targeted / addressed through this proposal? I guess if at all, I think I heard you, Max, say that's not quite what the focus is, but do you, I guess, to build on Hii's comment, and Hii, if you're still here, you're welcome to chime in too. Do you see any sort of spillover effects or if there are any direct correlations you'd like to discuss? I'm just looking for Hii to see if he's here. Are you here and do you want to add anything? Oh, you are here. I don't know if you want to add anything to your comment. Okay, I'm going to ask Max to answer your question, and if you want to unmute at any time, you're welcome to just go ahead and raise your hand.
Thank you for the question. Bill 78 does not directly address incentivizing visitors and their driving behaviors. But I will say that the parking price, the paid public parking pricing right now is well below market. And so in general, until our price floors are achieved through incremental increases, we acknowledge that we're influencing travel mode choices for not just residents, but visitors. And so we feel like this bill is long overdue, and that's why it's been introduced.
Okay. I'm going to ask if there's any other public comments, but again, you're welcome to chime in if you could raise your hand. Cross, can I ask if there are any questions or comments on Facebook or in the room?
Vice Chair, there is none.
Okay, and then how about guests joining in the Zoom room? Any questions or comments? You're welcome to raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, I am going to move us to our next agenda item. Max, if you can hang out with us. Our next agenda item is reviewing the Bill 78 testimony I drafted. And I wanted to go over some of the items that I've written, and then I'll see if folks would like to submit testimony to support this bill. Okay, let me make sure I am on the right thing I want to share. So this testimony was provided to the commissioners and the public as part of the posting. And I was just going to go over it very quickly, and then I can take some track changes if folks want to create some other edits. So first I have the bill addressed to, or sorry, the testimony addressed to both the mayor and just more generally city council, so that we don't have to come back and vote on this again, given that the hearing or this bill will be heard multiple times. So I have sort of the description of the bill up top in the subject line and first paragraph, and a little bit more about what we do as the commission. So it's sort of standard in all of our testimonies. I did want to highlight a couple of things I pulled from CCSR's Climate Action Plan. So this bill is really aligned nicely with some of the CAP strategies and actions, including strategy 3, encourage mode shift through parking efficiency, and specifically action 3.4, maximize efficiency of public parking at city-owned lots and parking spaces in destinations with high transportation alternatives, and implement dynamic metering rates. So I pulled that from the 2020 to 2025 CAP plan. I have a little bit more information here about how ground transportation emissions sort of line up relative to other sectors. So you folks have heard me say ground transportation makes up a lot of our greenhouse gas emissions. I have a note here about the importance of more efficiently managing our parking, coupled with some other CAP strategies, including encouraging density and mixed land use in strategic areas, as well as providing high quality alternatives to driving. So that's strategy 1 and strategy 2. I mentioned some other co-benefits here that Max has also listed in his slides. So I have here, if we can more efficiently manage our parking, we could make more space for bike ped infrastructure and urban trees. We'll see reduced vehicle emissions related to circling or cruising for parking. And we could also potentially repurpose parking with green infrastructure to help us reduce surface runoff and urban heat island effects. I have some literature that I reviewed here that talks about the relation between parking pricing and ground transportation emissions in this paragraph here. My really big one about parking is that parking takes up a lot of our really precious land. So thinking about, do we want to build more parking for what I call vehicle storage, or do we want people storage, aka housing? Do we want more space for agriculture, open space, things of that nature? So talking about sort of the amount of space cars take up here. And then also my other passion is sort of thinking about how we subsidize infrastructure for people who are more likely to use it. So wealthier households tend to have more cars, so subsidizing infrastructure for wealthier households and sort of making folks who don't own cars also pay for that subsidy. I have a stat here also on gas consumption and sort of cruising and circling, looking for parking here as well. And then I conclude with some statistics from the 2020 CAP survey related to respondents either being supportive of reforming parking management and or those outcomes that would come with better parking management. So that is the testimony. So I'll start again with the commissioners, and I can't see anybody, Chair Islam, so if you could help me call on any commissioners with questions or comments on the testimony, that would be really helpful.
Yep, I can definitely do that. Thank you, Vice Chair Otsuka. Commissioners, any comments to what Commissioner Otsuka has prepared for us? I think it looks great. I think it's very thorough, so I appreciate your lead on this, Vice Chair. Commissioner Olson.
Yeah, similarly, thank you so much for preparing this carefully crafted testimony. I can't really think of anything that you haven't covered. It's nice to see these reforms coming about. I agree, although I benefit from the under market parking fees. We really do need to systematically get people to choose public transportation. So this is a great start.
Yes, I also benefit from underpriced parking. I always tell people I drive, I walk, I bike, and I also take transit. So I benefit from that also.
Great. Wonderful. I think these are the comments from the commission,
Okay.
Vice Chair. So if you want to ask for comments from the public,
Yes.
do so. Okay.
Yeah.
Or I can ask, are there any comments? Yeah, sorry. Are there any comments from the public, both in the Zoom room and on Facebook Live in regards to the testimony letter that the commission has prepared to Bill 78? Cross, do we have any comments from the room?
Chair, there is no comments in the room or on Facebook.
Great, thank you so much. So Vice Chair Otsuka, I think we are good with the letter.
Okay.
I think what we need to do is do a vote so we can move this forward.
Yes. May I request an amendment to the requested action on the agenda?
Okay.
Is Max still here? I just wanted to confirm. Oh, did Max leave? Shucks. Or Ian, are you still here?
I'm here.
Oh, you're here. Okay. Max, I think I erroneously wrote on the agenda for the bill to go to the Infrastructure, Transportation and Technology Committee, but the next committee this bill goes to is Budget. Can you tell me which, is that right? Budget?
It is it's assigned to Budget, and it's not on the February 3rd agenda. So it's likely to be in the March. So there may be some time if you wanted to do whatever to hone your message or whatever, but we certainly appreciate the thoughtfulness and consideration of Bill 78. It was read for the first time this last Wednesday on the 28th in full council.
Okay. So Chair, my suggested revision to the action item would be, I was trying to copy and paste it in the chat, but it won't work, but I'll type it out shortly after this, is approve the Climate Change Commission's testimony on Bill 78, 2025, and submit to the City Council, and then strike out the Committee on Infrastructure, Transportation, and Technology, and replace that with Committee on Budget.
That sounds
I
great.
noticed in the agenda that it said Council Bill 78, but I just wanted to reiterate that it's an administration bill.
Ah, okay. I can make that change also.
Commissioner Romine.
Is it crucial, important that we specify which committee this is for? I just want to make sure we're able to recycle this, reuse it in future hearings. We're not restricting ourselves from that, are we?
I think if we make it too specific, we would be restricting ourselves. So I think making maybe the correction to the administrative bill would be fine. And I may suggest that we continue to address to the mayor and address to City Council Chair Tommy Waters. It is what we've done in the past, so
okay.
that we could continue to, send this testimony to the various hearings. And typically there are 3 hearings, right? And so Max, if I heard you correctly, you have 2 hearings remaining for this bill, potentially.
At least one hearing.
At least one more hearing. I see. Okay. You've already done your council introduction and then your first committee. Okay. Okay. So that's my recommendation, is to keep it more generalized. And I don't think it will make so much of a difference as long as we are timely in tracking this and then resubmitting that testimony letter when it goes before the various committees before the final council hearing. So
that sounds great.
Does that work for everyone? Okay, great. If that's good, I'm going to make a motion then to approve the Climate Change Commission testimony letter to Bill 78 with the following corrections, which changes it to an administrative bill. And then we would continue to keep the language as noted to the mayor and to the council chair, Tommy Waters. Is there a second?
Second that, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Romine. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great, wonderful. So our testimony letter, Max, for Bill 78 is approved and carried. We will watch this bill as it moves through council and submit that in support. So, but please do reach out to us if there are any other updates that you'd like the commission to look at. We do meet monthly.
Thank you all.
Great. Thank you so much, Max, for making time for us.
Okay.
Wonderful. I'm going to move us on to, thank you, Max, our next agenda item, 5C, which is a presentation on alternative fuels, repowering, and energy transitions in Hawaii. We've been lovely to have Monique Sanfries from the Hawaii State Energy Office. We understand this is a really important topic to our state, important to the city and county of Honolulu. So we were really excited to have Monique here so the commission can become more informed on the state's plan on alternative fuels. So welcome, Monique. I think you have the opportunity to share screen and to share with the commission.
I will go ahead and do that. I always get a little nervous when I have to share screen because I feel like they all go a little wild.
And you never know what you're going to share, right? So, but
okay. Hopefully that's okay. And then
We
I
see
did
that.
lose sight of everyone, so now I gotta get everyone back. All right. Aloha, everyone. Heavy topic for a Friday afternoon. So thank you for being here. I think this is first I want to recognize what a difficult topic it is, and I want to just tell people it's been hard for me to analyze this. And when I did my analysis, it was done with skepticism. So, I am just going to start with that, and hope I think everyone should be highly, we should be scrutinizing this and asking the hard questions. So I do welcome hard questions. So thank you, Melanie. My name is Monique Sanfus. I am the Managing Director of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy at the State Energy Office. I did complete this report when I was in my former role as Decarbonization Program Manager. So my background just academically is in environmental science. I have a bachelor's and master's in environmental science. I did climate and carbon accounting through both undergrad and grad school. And have kind of really learned the energy system and energy modeling, and also had a lot of help from an outside consultant who helped with the economic analysis and the energy system modeling for this report. The report was done back in 2025. This is the one additional slide I added that's not on the website. Just the overview. I'm going to go over sort of the guiding state laws and statutes that we are obligated to follow, an overview of the current energy ecosystem, and then an introduction and purpose to the study, an overview of the major findings, and I plan to spend a lot more time, since this is the Climate Commission, on the greenhouse gas analysis that was conducted as a part of the study. So, overview of really the three, I would say, driving statutes for the energy sector and the electricity sector. In particular, of course, we have the Renewable Portfolio Standard that everyone's pretty familiar with. It's our 100% renewable energy by 2045, and then interim targets of 40% and 70% in 2030 and 2040, respectively. It's unambiguous. It's a 100% target. It's a mandate for the public utilities. And it's binding, so it is driving investment. For those of you that don't know, the utility gets sort of incentive payments through what's called performance-based rate making for every amount of generation that they receive that's renewable over those interim targets. So there's sort of incentives. And then if they miss the mandated targets, there are financial penalties. So that's where that binding commitment is really important. Unfortunately, it does not address emissions at all. So you could have a very dirty renewable energy project that has a high carbon intensity that meets the renewable laws sort of requirements, whether it's sun, falling water, biomass, municipal solid waste. So you could have really dirty technologies meeting that mandate. So that is a gap within the Renewable Portfolio Standard. However, the state also has a zero emissions clean economy target as established through 225P-5, but it's non-binding. So it lacks enforceability. It's economy-wide. There's a lot of ambiguity when you read that law. Who does it apply to? Does it apply just to the state? Our interpretation is it's always applied, economy-wide, but I think there is quite a bit of room for interpretation on that. We tend to follow it as an economy-wide requirement. And then just one really key, Public Utilities Commission. They are the regulator of the electric utility, and they are required to consider life cycle greenhouse gas emissions, fossil fuel risk, and economic impact. So they have to kind of balance all of those things. It's not just life cycle emissions that they look at, but they also have to look at the risks of import, as well as the costs to ratepayers over time. And that's established in 269-6. So HRS, Hawaii Revised Statute 269-6 is really the requirement for the Public Utilities Commission. And the life cycle analysis component is backed by legal precedent and recent Supreme Court rulings. I want to note that our alternative analysis study does not bifurcate or circumvent any of these requirements. So the Public Utilities Commission will be required if and when they get a proposal in front of them, they will be required to evaluate it independently. So going into sort of where we are at, so the state operates 6 independent island grids, and I'm sure this is not new for many of you folks, but I think it's important that we're kind of all starting in the same baseline. A lot of times you hear the percentages. So we hear 59% Hawaii Island. Big chunk of that's geothermal. So when we lost the geothermal capacity during the volcanic eruptions, the percentage went down. So most recently in 2024, we should be getting 2025 numbers. Probably March is usually when we start to see those come in with the Public Utilities Commission. But each island's unique. It's very different. And then, really it's the focus of the alternative fuels analysis is on Oahu. You look at the size of Hawaii Island, Kauai, Maui. This is really representative of Maui, both Lanai and Molokai. They're at about 84% fossil. So they have a very, very small percentage of their generation that is renewable. So this, I would say Maui County is fairly representative of Maui Island. They aggregate it together. But Oahu is definitely the challenge in terms of just the demand, the size of the demand, and where we're at. So, Kauai is operating for days or full 24-hour days on renewable energy, and that's very incredible, but they have a very, very different demand size that we have to be cognizant of. Stepping back, so these percentages really represent the net generation. So they may not necessarily be reflective of every input into the system. So we have derived these sort of Sankey diagrams or flow charts to show how resources are used. And if you isolate just the electric sector, you see most of our fuel is coming from this residual fuel oil. Distillate fuel oil is your diesel, and then residual fuel oils, what's called low sulfur fuel oil. If you've ever seen it, it's black, it's tarry, it's sort of the bottom of the barrel of the crude. You actually need to heat it to have it be viscous enough. It's almost like in pretty the blizzard tip over your head. It's pretty nasty stuff. We have a little bit of waste, small percentage of distributed solar, which is on the roof or behind the meter, and then utility scale solar, as well as some small contributions from other resources. This end use sector is pretty important because you see this large chunk here. It's called your generation losses. So that has to do with your how efficient your power plants are. So we operate very inefficient power plants. Of course, there's always going to be some level of generation lost, no matter how good your technology is. But we are operating pretty inefficient power plants, which I'll go on to the next slide, which means there's a lot of energy wasted. And it's really all of this that's going into the atmosphere during combustion. So if you want an immediate sort of reduction in your emissions, one of the best ways to do that is to improve your power plant efficiency. And then I'll just add here liquid fuels, particularly your heavier oils. They do contain impurities, they're more solid, and that hinders the combustion and creates residue. So it leads to higher operation and maintenance costs of your power plants. And then, it doesn't mix as uniformly with air. So in the combustion chamber, there's sometimes incomplete combustion, and that further drives down your efficiency. So you can talk about improving your power plants by, upgrading systems, but it's also like you can't separate fuel from those efficiency upgrades. So our power generation efficiency is far below the national average. And you see our power plant sort of on the bottom here. So Kahe was our largest generator in 2023. It typically is. So these numbers are from 2024. Sorry, the net generation numbers are from 2024 with the efficiencies from 2023. They don't shift around too much. So Kahe is around 32% efficient. So for really every 100 units of energy that go into that system, about 3 units of useful or 30 units of useful energy come out. Kalaeloa combined cycle, it is our most efficient power plant. It is a combined cycle unit. What that means is it has 2 sort of regular combustion turbines, and then a third one where the excess steam goes. And rather than being released in the air, it spins a turbine to generate electricity. US national average is probably not the percentage we want to strive for. So newer combined cycle units are really approaching that 62% efficiency. And then, on a grid average, we want to be approaching more of that 50% number in operation as you cycle the power plants. Because we are so inefficient in our power generation, we have the highest emission intensity next to Puerto Rico. So Oahu is here in the dark blue, and then the outer islands, they combine as a separate subregion. And that is certainly higher than the US average. Subregions are important to consider rather than states because there is major power flow across state lines on the continent, whereas, of course, on Hawaii, we are entirely independent. So that's why you see sort of the different subregions rather than states. And then this includes all utility scale generation. So it does not include your distributed solar, but you can see from that other chart here that's an important input to our system. But overall, this is really what is driving our emissions intensity. So 2023, for those of you who are unfamiliar, the PUC, the Public Utilities Commission, accepted, but they did not approve the integrated grid plan. So the integrated grid planning process is really how the utility determines what resources they are to procure. And once, as with most work, once it's published, it almost immediately becomes out of date. So some major changes, if you look at sort of these forecasts, we don't have offshore wind was set to come online in 2035. And really, in order to do that, it would have had to have started the federal BOEM leasing process really last year for that timeline to make sense. So in the most optimistic scenario for offshore wind, we would not anticipate that coming online until mid 2040s, 2041, 42. And that's like assuming everything goes right. In, you know, the federal leasing process, they're able to open a call area for that offshore wind. So we know that this is actually something that has changed even since the time of our analysis, and it's making the percentage of generation. So all of this, if it's not offshore wind, it has to be something, and it has to be something with what we call a high capacity factor. So more availability. So, you know, 400 megawatts of wind which was prescribed, does not equal like 400 megawatts of solar because of the capacity factor. So we have some challenges when we look at even the land constrained case, which had fossil fuel generation all the way up until 2044. And then it was cut off in 2045. But without that offshore wind, it's certainly more challenging. And there's land use requirements. Yeah, go ahead. And I should have said, you know, feel free to interrupt me, commissioners, while I'm going through it. Go ahead, Brad.
Thanks, Monique. I wonder if you could explain it. It looks like onshore wind remains steady or decreases to 2035 and then disappears. What's the rationale there? I know it's been controversial in places, but yeah, just wondering about that.
Yeah, great question. So we anticipate because of the city and county ordinances that passed on setback distance, that onshore wind, most of those facilities will be unable to repower. So the utility did forecast those eventually going away because of that, the impact of that setback. So that's even more generation lost that we are going to have to make up for. But yeah, great question.
Sorry,
So-
Monique. Sorry, since
Go
Brad
ahead,
asked
go
the
ahead.
question. If you could go back to the last slide, just, you know, seeing the increase of just solar energy, both probably distributed, right, and utility. Is that just assuming then that the HECO grid or all of our utility grids are also upgraded at the same time to then increase capacity to receive solar energy coming in? Because that's been part of the challenge as well too. Our grid is very old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is definitely the generation
Yeah.
side of it, but in order to meet the requirements to get this much utility scale solar, even in the land constraint, which has pretty aggressive distributed targets. So that is going to require substantial upgrades to transmission and distribution systems. And, you know, we are going through a renewable energy zone planning process with the utility to kind of find areas where, and the whole concept behind a renewable energy zone is the next slide kind of shows it well, is to identify areas where there is additional capacity and kind of pre-build out that transmission and distribution ahead of time and de-risk the interconnection cost or lower the interconnection costs for the utility. But I will say finding the land is incredibly difficult. So what you have here, shown on this map is what we've determined to be technically feasible area for development based on, and this is NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab, now the National Lab of the Rockies. They did this sort of technical feasibility mapping where they said, okay, you have to have slope less than 6%. I can't remember what the slope was exactly off the top of my head. So you need flat land. You don't want to develop on military land, and then land that's readily available for utility scale development. And the base scenario fills up a great big portion of that land if we are to follow those capacity needs. It doesn't necessarily mean that, the private landowners that exist, all right, so it doesn't mean that there's agreement from those private landowners. It's just, it's technically acceptable. And it's feasible to put it on that land. But we talked to developers, and it's they've scoped out the land. They know the land that's available, and it's not what's pictured here. Kiana, go ahead.
Commissioner Olson, did you have your hand up first? I didn't want to cut in line. Okay. Hi, Monique. I think you answered some of my questions. I was going to ask if that was public or privately owned land. So this is private owned, or sorry, yeah, private
It's
owned land?
both. It's a mixture of
Okay.
both. So, you look at and I'm happy to provide the resource for this Alt-1 technical feasibility area from the National Lab of the Rockies, their technical potential study, because they did apply a bunch of different exclusions. So some of it was on they excluded DoD land.
Okay.
And that, yeah, I would say the biggest driver is probably slope.
Okay.
But yeah.
And then my second question was, you mentioned renewable energy zoning. Is that something we imagine would be like a new zoning class, either at the county level or at the state land use commission? Or was that just, you meant just
Zoning is
exactly what you
probably a
said?
bad word.
Oh, okay. I was like,
When I'm talking to the county.
okay,
It's
got
just
it.
really like areas to focus on building out additional transmission capacity to
Okay.
interconnect these systems. Yeah, not zoning in the sense of planning,
Okay.
city planning.
Thanks, Monique.
Mhm.
Hi, Monique. Thank you so much for coming today and explaining all of this to us. So I definitely reject some of the criteria applied to identifying these, but I understand them, right? Having spent a day out west side this week talking with some of the community groups preserving land, one of their major concerns is the growth of these solar farms, right? I know you know that, but I wanted to make sure we're careful about the use of our cultural and agricultural lands for energy generation, and wonder how much existing kind of urban infrastructure and buildings, and in light of the parking discussion, like parking lots can be fitted with solar as opposed to using one of the most precious resources that we have, which is our land.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. I think it's definitely something we are going to press upon the electric utility moving forward, and really have tried a lot of those commercial say parking lot solar, we would depend, this is not the black and white thing, but typically that would go to serve, say, the load need. It would be a behind the meter system. There's probably going to be likely export to the grid as well. Batteries help with that. But typically, say you put it on a big warehouse, it becomes behind the meter. So it's actually sort of in this DER bucket. And we're projecting like this use of land, granted it's really hard to break this down in 2 slides. But you're still projecting that DER growth. And I think that's something, regardless, we need to like look at creative ways of incentivizing. And it doesn't change the need for firm power or firm and dispatchable thermal generation as we build out these systems. It's something that, like, you look at the current plan that's proposed and it's easy to very, very quickly pick apart how difficult it is to do what we are trying to do. So I totally wholeheartedly agree with that. But just know it would be more of a distributed resource with some availability to dispatch to the grid. Any other questions? So this does kind of cover, I would say, the existing, what I wanted to cover on sort of the existing system, the existing plan. So it's probably a good time to pause for questions on everything unrelated to the fuel study, but really just the existing system. Okay. So after the Maui wildfires, Hawaiian Electric was, it had a lot of liability. There's a substantial financial borrowing issues, and Governor Green asked our office to say, hey, what can we do to help, the electric utility out? How do we provide cost savings and carbon emission reductions to our customers and to all ratepayers in the state? So that was, cost and carbon was kind of like the 2 drivers of this study. Excuse me. And then attracting capital, so outside capital investment to support sustained operations in the state. So we started this study really effectively, probably about 3 months into 2024, 4 months, April 2024. And, contracted with HDR was our consultant to look at the various fuel options that existed. So I know the study is often called the LNG study. We started it as an alternative fuel study. We wanted to look at all fuel options in light of, technological maturity. Can they be dispatched in that 2030 immediate timeframe when we know that firm resources are set to retire? And then commercial viability, and then also life cycle carbon intensity. So we looked at all 3 components. I will say, things like local, not so much the imported because of emissions, but local biodiesel, renewable diesel. It does have a high TRL. It's ready to go today. It can be transported, but it's not widely available to meet our fuel demands. And there's a lot of competing sectors for that fuel. And then some of these other technologies, they just don't meet that technological maturity level to fully be adopted. So when we did our analysis, we had to choose a base and a build case. That's what you always, you have to start with something. And we conducted a life cycle cost analysis to evaluate the capital expenditures to get fuel, liquefied natural gas on island, operation and maintenance costs, the fuel costs, and any sort of interim RPS penalties. I will say that was done more in our sensitivity analysis, which I'm not going to get into. Our preferred plan did meet RPS requirements, and we really strive to make sure that all of our amortization periods or your payback periods minimize stranded assets. So we did have really tight timelines for payoff. Which did it was hard, and it makes this sort of decision time it needs to be done in a timely manner. If we are to go through it, base case, so no gas transition. We assume firm generation remains oil. And then we generally just took the integrated grid planning assumptions, but we did apply a larger load, and that's to comply with transportation electrification targets. One thing to note, so Waiau is going, it has an active proposal through the Public Utilities Commission to repower. And those costs were not included in the base case because the details of those costs weren't available at the time of the study. Hawaiian Electric is looking at $1.15 billion to upgrade 6 turbines at Waiau Power Plant. If this was thrown into the base case, it would have added substantial costs to the base case. So in that sense, a lot of our cost savings were conservative. I would say the load growth assumptions are pretty aggressive. If I were to kind of summarize the 2 driving assumptions. Under the build case, we added gas infrastructure and assumed in 2 phases that LNG would displace low sulfur fuel oil generation. Heat rates, that's your efficiency of your power plant. So under the base case, we used existing dispatch and forecasted capacity factors and heat rates. And then build case, we use specs from the OEMs or the manufacturers, as well as model outputs to account for dispatch. And then we did look at dispatching gas in some of our initial analysis to the outer islands. We did find that that was not cost effective at all for the outer islands, so that limited our analysis to just serving Oahu. And then the gas only infrastructure, so things that wouldn't be able to be reused past 2045. We did have those amortization periods phased out by 2045. Dr. Olson?
Hi, yeah, thanks. Thank you for going through these assumptions. So one question is why your demand growth is so much higher than previous estimates. And you kind of get to it here, the vehicle electrification, but does that explain, can you unpack that a bit?
Yep. So it is vehicle electrification that is driving load growth. If you look at IGP planning, it does not meet our transportation electrification targets. So we do assume by 2045, 100% of sales, so not stock, but 100% of sales for light duty vehicles would be fully electrified. And we do kind of assume under that fairly managed charging, so charging during the day as well. But it is, a lot higher load growth than what Hawaiian Electric has in their IGP, but we got those electric vehicle that load growth shape was done in Hawaiian Electric's pathways analysis that they did back in 2022 or 2023.
Right. Yeah. So your load growth is completely different. It's much higher, right? And it is a
Yes,
driver of your results. So really kind of understanding how you got there.
it
Um,
is. And I will say, it is a major driver, but if you remove that offshore wind piece, that, assuming you can do all sorts of things, I would say that's a piece of analysis that we need to rerun the models on different load growth scenarios. So I think that work is actively being done now. So, I think we had limited time budget, but
yeah.
that was a recommendation to run those analyses with a lower load growth. But load's growing. We know that. We're seeing that. So, Kiana, Commissioner.
Yeah, I just wanted to note for you, Monique, and then for the public that the commission also recently reviewed and heard from the Hawaii Department of Transportation on their energy security and waste reduction plan. So, Monique, you're very familiar, but just for the context of the public, there is a huge investment in electric vehicle charging and a push for sort of supporting folks adopting electric vehicles or purchasing electric vehicles maybe a lot faster than before. But there's also a big commitment in there for mode shift and supporting folks making trips, walking, biking, using transit, and then carpooling and vanpooling more as well. And I think that also Monique's other really great report that she put out is the Energy Office's Decarb report. I think her report does a really good job of acknowledging you know, the more effective strategies in terms of reducing our transportation emissions, as well as the demand for energy to power electric cars are really tough strategies that are really policy oriented and will be very controversial. We talked about one of them today, parking and pricing. So I just want to sort of acknowledge that for everybody that we've been talking about some of the other items that are sort of leading to Monique's assumptions in this particular report, but there are other sort of strategies to help reduce that demand for energy from our ground transportation sector. So just to contextualize for the group, Kirsten, I think also to sort of address some of your concerns about that really high demand for electricity via EVs. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Kiana. So just looking at the build and the base case side by side, we, for the most part, we held the same constraints on the model and just allowed it if capacity expansion modeling, production cost modeling, you feed into it your assumptions, you want to meet the RPS targets, and then it chooses your lowest cost resource based on the constraints provided. And the model did end up choosing liquefied natural gas as the fuel option, even with the upfront infrastructure costs because of the fuel cost savings. And then what you see is, in 2040, you start to see a little bit of an alternative fuel, whether it's hydrogen, renewable natural gas, biofuel, that starts to come into the picture to meet those RPS requirements. And then in 2045, not unlike the integrated grid plan, you do see a switch. We did choose hydrogen And we chose that because it was the only fuel readily available to meet our carbon emission reduction targets as well. But I do want to recognize hydrogen is not a perfect solution. It has some serious round trip efficient. It takes a lot of energy to generate hydrogen if you are going to do it electrolytically through solar. And there's a lot of efficiency lost. So we would likely have to import that, whatever fuel it is. The cost assumptions for the life cycle cost analysis were just based on amortization period, so extending the life of the non-gas related infrastructure. So going into that sort of summary of findings, we ran a lot of sensitivities on this, and I encourage folks to read through the appendix and the economic analysis if you are really thinking about the costs. But we did find that through fuel cost savings over time, following the using, the rate of return for Hawaiian Electric. So if you discount all of your upfront investment, you do find that fuel cost savings over time result in, a substantial reduction in costs. And then, eventually the FSRU, it was assumed that it's at least or the floating storage regasification unit, that's really the offshore unit that turns the liquid into the gas before it's piped on shore, that those would eventually be, go away, float away as least options. And then I'm going to go into how this was derived. How am I on time? I forgot to start my timer.
We are generally scheduled to 4.
Okay.
I do know you have a few more slides, and I do think there will be some public comment, and we have a few more items after the agenda.
Okay, so I will try to
Thanks,
move it.
I know it's a deep topic, but thank you for checking in.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So over 20 and 100-year global warming potentials, we did see about 38 to 44% reduction in total life cycle emissions with the assumptions that I will go over next. You can see most of those reductions are driven by the fuel combustion phase. So that's the power plant piece of it that I was talking about earlier. But we did look at the life cycle and included both the 20 and 100-year global warming potential to account for methane. And I will go into that a bit now. So greenhouse gases, obviously a critical and statutory requirements. We are required to look at that. So when I say life cycle carbon intensity, that's the total emissions of all life cycle stages per unit of energy output. There's 2 carbon intensities that are typically used in industry. That's your carbon intensity of the fuel itself from well to pump. So that's what you would see for your federal RFS programs. For many of your clean fuel standard programs, say out of California, Washington, Oregon, they have a clean fuel standard market program set up. So that is based on the CI or the carbon intensity of the fuel from well to pump. For the electricity sector, it is very important to account for that power plant efficiency and to account for it at all life cycle stages. So you want to make sure you're accounting for heat loss, and that's going to be your CI of your electricity delivered from well to outlet. And you want to make sure you're applying that multiplier to account for that power plant efficiency at every single step in the life cycle stage, because if you need 100 units to generate 35 units, you need to transport 100 units. You need to produce 100 units. So it's important that that multiplier is applied. And that's pretty standard across all, greenhouse gas accounting frameworks to do that. I used the GREET model, but I did adjust different carbon intensities. So I didn't just use the standard GREET accounting. And then, of course, global warming potential measures how much heat a greenhouse gas traps in the atmosphere over time. Methane is, of course, not a good greenhouse gas. It is about 82 to 86 times more potent than carbon dioxide when you look at it over a 20-year lifetime. It does oxidize to CO2 in the atmosphere after about 12.5 years on average. And then, over 100 years, it is less potent, so it has a global warming potential of 29.8, and those are from the 2024 IPCC values. And we chose to use both. I want to, recognize when natural gas is methane, and if it is completely combusted, it's releasing carbon dioxide. So it's important to really minimize leaks in the system. So looking at where we're sourcing our fuels for the comparative, we are getting a lot of our fuels from Libya, Argentina. We do get some from the continental US. Some of it comes from Alaska, and then other countries throughout. We were getting a lot of it from Russia before the Ukraine invasion. That's when we had a lot of volumes coming from Libya. We did recently acquire a new software where we are able to trace all of our fuel really to the source port. And then from there, it's a lot easier to derive the likely production field that we're getting it from. And we were able to track a lot of our Libyan fuel to the Masala oil field in Libya. And this is an aerial, and this is not just a lucky shot. You go back through a lot of different satellite imagery. You go back and you look at the methane plumes and the satellite mappers that you see, and there's a lot of methane in addition to particulates, other nasty stuff coming out of where we get our oil from. Places like Canada and Australia, where we would source gas from, upstream, they have less methane and less carbon dioxide emissions. So looking at system boundaries, they are slightly different for your crude and your liquefied natural gas. So we did everything from the extraction point to the delivery to the outlet. Liquefied natural gas has a few extra processes because you do have to liquefy it and store it and regasify it in order to get it to the power plant for electricity production and delivery. And we really tried to account for emissions at each stage in the fuel life cycle. So we really tried to use two methodologies when we were deriving our emission factors. So we used the default GREET and adjusted based on transportation or transport distances, and then plugged in different leakage factor assumptions for different stages in the life cycle. And then we also used, in addition to sort of that traditional bottom-up emission factor, we used measurement-based carbon intensities or emission factors from the RMI OCI Plus index. They just released a new 2025 update, so I'm kind of going through and updating those numbers now. And that is really important because certain parts of the fuel life cycle, it's a lot easier to account for that methane and do sort of measurement-based accounting based on either satellite flyovers, or you can have drone flyovers, and then use a hybrid approach to make sure you're accounting for transmission and transmission in the sense of like pipelines and liquefaction to inform the overall measurements. So this is the RMI, what they do. They do a hybrid approach when they derive their emission factors. And when you look at that data set, it's very clear, like source country matters. If you look at, and not even country, but oil field basin, if you look at gas in the continental US, which we would likely be able to source either because of Jones Act restrictions, gas in the Permian Basin in Texas is very different than what you would be getting in the Appalachians, or say Texas versus Colorado. Those methane emissions are very different because a lot of it's actually regulatory and the regulatory oversight. Malaysia, for example, is not really a country, an ideal country we would want to be importing from at this time, because they are leaking a lot of methane into the atmosphere. And that's due to their flaring and venting practices. And then that progression towards, cleaning up the sort of upstream phase is really critical. And I will say, countries like Europe, Germany, in Europe, and like countries like Germany, where they are having to import now via LNG, they are looking at frameworks to lower carbon intensity of fuel that they procure. The United States was doing that and participating in that through the MMRV, Monitoring, Measurement, and Verification Program. Unfortunately, that did stall with the new administration. So looking at upstream emissions estimates, so this does not include that really important piece that is the combustion in the power plants from likely source countries, and then where we derive it today. Canada, by far, just the upstream, midstream, and transportation, it is substantially lower than the Masala oil field, which we get a lot of our oil from, and then on average lower than the Argentinian well fields. Similarly, you look at the oil in green here from Libya and Argentina. It is a lot higher in carbon intensity than places like the Canada, which isn't even showing on this slide, but Canada is actually the lowest carbon intensity for LNG export in the world. So rated results from all of the different sources that we used across all of them, across the board, you do see substantial reduction in your life cycle greenhouse gas emissions when you're comparing LNG and crude. And then finally, to conclude, we really feel the status quo is not acceptable when we talk about oil-fired generation and maintaining that for, until 2045. When our RPS kicks in, that's not acceptable. And, biofuels, if you care about carbon, that's not the perfect solution either for a fuel switch. And regardless, I think we need greater efficiency and flexibility in our power plants. And I really don't think that it's either LNG or renewables. Like, we have to do both at the same time. So with that, I am happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Monique. Commissioners, if it's okay, I might ask a few questions. So Monique, I know this is a study, right, on looking at alternative fuels, and I appreciate you coming to speak to us. I know we'll probably have a lot of clarifying questions, but a few things that you talked about were the efficiencies of the plant, right? And I'm assuming in all of these studies, it assumes that all of our plants are to be fully retrofitted. We are going to get the most efficient turbines to ensure that we are optimizing performance, or is that like a study that needs to occur by the state to then establish performance parameters for our plants to ensure that we are meeting our greenhouse gas targets, just from the HRS standpoint, not even
Yeah.
looking at the study. So
So that's something I think the PUC already does.
yeah.
They are required to look at performance. There's heat rate requirements. I think they all need to be looked at again, and I think that's going to very much be a part of the next couple of years. I think, the existing, I think this is the importance of like following PUC dockets, because that's where a lot of the guardrails, if you will be established for this. And, we want to make sure any new project, if you are putting in new turbines, it is meeting sort of those performance criteria. And then also the ability to load follow as more intermittents come up, and you don't have to sort of run your power plants at a pretty high base load in order to, and have to curtail your renewables as well. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
It does. I think that's like a separate thing to track, right? And really just enforcing, I think, broader standards to the PUC when they do set those regulatory limits. A question about the fuel. So, right, I think the intent is by exploring the LNG, right, and having these plants be able to take liquefied gas, that it also has fuel flexibility. In the report, did you look at, because the transition period is about 15 years, did you look at an introduction of another fuel? Like, for example, hydrogen. And I know the factors of it not coming in, it's still not mature enough, right, to be really distributed at a proper rate to be effective. And there are many different conversations about how do you generate hydrogen in the most efficient manner. But I'm curious to know, like, if that has come into factor, because I think that will help to give some clarity to people of like the flexibility, right, in the plants from a fuel standpoint.
Yeah, so most of the combustion turbines, the combined cycle units, they would be able to easily switch to hydrogen, liquid fuel, like that. That's a fairly low capital switch. We actually contemplated for, you have to have emergency fuel, say that floating storage rig, there's a, hurricane, and that unit has to go out to sea. We would have to have liquid backup, and it'd be able to switch to that liquid backup fairly quickly. And, I would say other fuels that are readily available to blend hydrogen, you have to be very careful because there's embrittlement on the pipelines. You don't want, the steel to be embrittled, which hydrogen does. So you could blend it to further lower your carbon intensity. Renewable natural gas, that's also something that would easily be able to be integrated. And if it's integrated into the pipeline, that's what's ultimately feeding into the power plant.
Great, thanks. I have other questions, but I want to give some time to the other commissioners. Commissioner Olsuka.
I was pausing because I was going to ask a broader question, and not specifically about the report. But Commissioner Olson, you probably have a more specific question than me. Do you want to go first?
Um, I'm struggling on how to kind of ask you this. So a lot of your analysis seems to be about counting up in terms of the life cycle, exactly where we got our fuel, right, and the emissions caused in that place of the fuel, right? But really, I mean, fuel is a global market, right? And so we would think about this differently, right? Of what is the alternative, not necessarily where we got it, but at that moment, but kind of where we would have gotten it in the global market, right? So we call this kind of looking at the marginal the marginality, the marginal source of it. And so our alternative really is like natural gas from fracking, right? That's kind of our marginal. And so like a lot of these assumptions are challengeable, I guess, and really sensitive, like between like our constraints on land use or like the baseline assumption. And you've done such a wonderful job of going through it and explaining them, et cetera. But given the magnitude of the impact of this report, right, of locking us into a technology for the next decades, we really need to scrutinize very carefully all of these assumptions. So I guess I would, throw it back to you a little bit of what do you see as some of the major flaws that you would like to see, or I know that you would like to see challenged, and other better approaches, et cetera.
Yeah, it's a great question, and you have to choose some assumptions. So, otherwise you're going to be spinning your head. What I will say is you look at global averages of crude versus natural gas, and you put them into power plants, we know it burns a lot, more completely cleaner. You're seeing that carbon reduction. What I will also say is long-term fuel contracts are very different than buying things on the spot market, which is more typical for oil purchases, and you would really seek long-term contracts with hopefully fuel producers that are more responsible. I'm really, really hopeful that the European market is going to help drive some of those better practices for gas export globally, because they are such a large volume purchaser. And then, I have a really hard time, with I really tried to make the analysis as conservative as I could. So I really I think you could choose higher, say, leakage rates, and RMI has another resource where you can, if you put your leakage over 5%, that's where you're starting to become, dirtier than oil. But I didn't see that in a lot of the measurement-based accounting, with the exception of a few production fields. So like I said, I called it out. Malaysia, if you source from those countries, it's dirtier. If you source potentially from the Permian Basin in Texas, which we're not going to, because I don't see us getting around the Jones Act anytime soon. It's comparable at best to what we're doing today. But what we are doing today, and the whole lock-in thing, we're deciding on almost a $2 billion investment for 6 combustion turbines that are set to burn oil for until 2045, with no fuel cost savings associated with it.
Kiana, go ahead. We can
I-
circle back.
Monique, I think I'm coming at this from like the more broadly, like what this, and I don't know if you're the right person to ask this question to, but like more broadly, what the state's like priorities and sort of vision are for like our energy future. And so I'm really interested in like demand management. And I saw your assumptions about how so much of our electricity demand is going to come from converting us from ICE vehicles to electric vehicles. And I'm like thinking about this in the context of, is this where, do we want to assume that everybody is going to drive an electric vehicle at the same rate at which people are driving gas vehicles? And do we want to invest $2 billion in this huge energy project? And like, or should we be thinking about investing that money into, I know you talked about I know the land constraints are a big challenge, but into renewable energy or to demand management strategies. And I mentioned earlier, Monique, in the assumptions piece that like, we know that the things that are going to move the needle on ground transportation and MoShift are really controversial and really hard. But I'm wondering like, like the trade-offs, like could we invest in something, and we'll probably still need some sort of more firm energy, right? But do we need to build for that much more energy moving forward, or can we invest in some demand management strategies, or just additional, and I would say or I shouldn't say or, because I'm really keen on demand management, but and or like also like more renewable energy. And I think this question is more rhetorical, Monique, but I'm kind of just thinking out loud when I was looking at this presentation. It makes me very concerned. Like I knew that the energy demand would go up substantially if we're converting everybody to an EV, but I'm thinking about like my role in my regular job, like to help reduce that demand and to help people and provide them better choices so they don't feel like they have to take their car, EV or not, right? With all the other disbenefits of driving, and environmental or not. Like how can we support that shift so that we don't have this high energy demand and have to invest in this huge like energy project? So I think, yeah, maybe more comment than question, Monique, but you're welcome to respond if you want.
I mean, I agree. Like, there's nothing to disagree with. Like, but it's at some point there is a reality that we need firm dispatchable power, and that that 30% sort of getting to 70%, that remaining 30%, what happens if there's rain for 6 days? And we saw it in December with our dispatch data, 6 days where all of our solar output was around 5% of the output. Are we going to have rolling brownouts to make up for that generation that is not available? We can't, as the energy office, say that that's acceptable. So that's that is modeled to happen if upgrades are not made, be it through a fuel switch or not. Demand management, I strongly believe in, but you look at the time of use rate docket, it was just closed. So like a lot of the tools in the toolbox when we do pilot studies, they're effective, but they're not as effective as we would like them to be, and they really have to be adopted across the board. And like historically, that's been very challenging.
Thank you, Commissioner Osuka. I just to your comment, I think these things have to happen in parallel together. And I think policy, you brought it up, Monique, has to really encourage these things, right? And it's really hard. And I'll take from the building sector standpoint, it is really hard to estimate what demand looks like. You have to make, well, we try to make the most conservative and also optimistic sort of modeling choices, right? Assuming that people improve their behavior, which will ultimately change the demand. So I'm encouraged, Monique, when you heard that you guys are going to look at different sort of demand profiles and studies. And I think that will help, that will be encouraging to like the city and county and other counties to sort of look at what can they do downstream from a policy standpoint to help to manage those loads. But I want to go to Director Fox. You had your hand up, and then I'll go to you, Commissioner Olson. And I think if there are perhaps no other comments from the commission, I do know there are some comments from the public, so I do want to try and respect that. So.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Monique, for presenting. I just had a few questions as a government administrator. And so for those of us that are government administrators like herself, policy is where these studies can become policy of consequence. And administrators like us have to exercise judgment and control of the conditions for when high need, high cost, or high potential decisions are shaped for the lives of the public. And so my questions are really essentially around the study and the process itself, the general funds used, which fiscal years those spanned, if you continue to have general funds that you'll be able to utilize for more analysis, especially where there are gaps and limitations. As a scientist myself, my questions for you are, where do you think the greatest limitations of your study lie? And what would HSCO be doing to remediate some of those limitations going forward in the future? I have questions for you on what your peer review process was and how you utilized local expertise and knowledge to incorporate into your peer review, and if you can explain your methodology and approach to make sure that different vantage points were utilized. And then my final question for you, I know that that was several and many, is how is this study and your analysis being utilized by the Coalition for Hawaii's Energy Future?
That was really a lot. I'm going to try and do my best and get to all of them, but I may have to ask you to repeat some of them. So I am actually just going to drop the link to the award for full transparency on hands. So it was leftover coronavirus funds from the Gov's office that funded the study. And I will try to find it on just the link to the hands award to answer that. And then peer reviewed, I would say we used a contractor and we used peer reviewed studies and numbers to inform the analysis. So all of the emission factors for the greenhouse gas analysis were pulled from other peer-reviewed studies. If you go into the appendix of the report, you can kind of see how our numbers differ from the published peer-reviewed work. So I encourage you to do that, and we use standard models. So it was there wasn't any us going out and taking measurements of emissions. It was using other peer-reviewed work. Sorry, I need you to repeat some of those questions.
Yeah, just so my question up top for you, Monique, was you had mentioned that you had limited time and budget. How long did you have to complete this study, and what was the budget that you had to be able to utilize? Do you have remaining funds left? And I think you had mentioned that there were COVID relief monies. I'm assuming this is ARPA or SLFRF, but I'm happy to look at the hands. But I would assume you just generally have at the top of your head, since you had mentioned you had limited time and budget. Could you share with us what those constraints were?
Yeah, so I can say we were asked to do the study after the wildfires. Contracting takes, we went through a professional services contract, and that took, by the time we encumbered the funds, I would say, and I didn't really step into it until probably like after the contract, started the contract. That's when I stepped into it. So it's probably not, I might not be the best person to answer your question, but I would say we started early work in March, April of 2024 and published the study in 2025. A lot of the work, we also worked with National Renewable Energy Lab on some of the costing in addition to FGE, and then some of the engage modeling that's also included. And those were leftover funds from something else. I'm really not the best person to answer your question on the contracts itself, but hopefully that answers kind of the timeline.
That does. So you're not familiar with how much the contract or the expense of the study's cost was?
I don't know off the top of my head, so I don't want to give you a wrong answer or wrong number. Sorry, I'm totally blanking. I think I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. It's not meant to be a trick question. It was just for transparency, and just for the good of the information that you're sharing. I think the context of how the study is administered is important for all of us too. As I had said in my opening, government administration means a lot to individuals like us. I wanted to follow up on my last question, Chair. Monique, how is your study and your analysis being utilized for the Coalition for Hawaii's Energy Future?
I don't know. Do you know members of the group? Because we obviously have the strategic partnership agreement with JERA. They did approach the governor's office when all of this, but to be very honest and frank, I'm keeping my own distance from that as a staff person. And I did just drop the award. I found it. So it was awarded in April, and it was a contract of about $820,000, and all of it was spent.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
And then I remember your last question, that the follow-up analysis and sort of the critiques of my own study. I think I went through it. It's doing the analysis with lower load assumptions built in. I would certainly want to take that back. And yeah, we did a lot of cost sensitivities, so I feel like, digging through that is also important, and I encourage people to look at it.
Thank you, Dr. Fox. Monique, just to follow up with Dr. Fox's question about the Hawaii Energy Futures Coalition and the partnership that the governor signed with JERA. If we were curious to learn more about that, who is a good point of contact for us to reach out to?
Definitely reach out to our office.
Okay.
Yeah, Energy, DBED Energy, our website. And then I believe, just for transparency, the strategic partnership, the full text of it is on our website. Let me get the link to that as well. So that's available. I did put that. Sorry, I had typed in energy, and there we go. That's the link to the strategic partnership agreement. And again, like I said, all of this has to go through full commission review. This was a desktop analysis.
The PUC as the commission, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Monique. Commissioner Olson.
Thank you. That was actually very helpful, Dr. Fox. Thank you for running through that. And it's a kind of a foreign process for me. When you're redoing your assumptions or doing sensitivity analysis on the assumptions, another one that really struck me was the assumption that rooftop solar will not grow. And I wonder why not, and whether that is something to revisit. So that was one question. My other question was like this
does
oh,
grow. It does grow. It might be pretty small on the size,
Very,
but there
yeah.
is growth.
Okay, yeah. I mean, looking at the slide, it's hard to tell that there's any growth in the rooftop solar. But great. I mean, but yeah, I think that's something all of us would like to see more of, and understanding that right now our antiquated grid does not support that, but investment could go towards supporting that rather than supporting LNG, right? So that's a kind of a fundamental right off the bat. It feels like this report ruled out investment
I
and
don't think that's a fair characterization of the study.
okay. Okay. All right. So you're not going to do any further analysis on alternative.
We are
that involve-
always, I mean, we always are. We have been historically. They just like, that's not a fair characterization of the study at all. Rooftop solar, we've put in an executive order to put it on 50,000 roofs. And we focused that on Oahu. So that's just not a fair characterization of our work or the analysis conducted.
Okay. The other question I had is, I mean, this isn't the first time LNG has come up. A decade ago, there were a number of analyses done, and I'm wondering how those factored in to what you did in your report.
Yeah, so great question. We did take actually some of the engineering design assumptions. So that was during the power supply improvement plan days during Hawaiian Electric when they were looking through the NextEra merge. So we did look at some of the engineering assumptions and cost assumptions. Cost assumptions, I mean, it's a different world today. We all know that, but we did kind of take into account some of the distance, the actual infrastructure to inform analysis for the Hawaii Gas's proposed portion. Very different from what Hawaiian Electric had proposed, because they had proposed doing like ISO containers of LNG, which are not very cost effective. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, Monique. Commissioner Olson, just to follow up with your questions about the distributed energy for the solar, do you want to get more finite numbers versus the graphic? Will that help you to sort of understand the trending moving forward?
Yeah, I'll dig in more because being struck by the graph on slide 12. And really seeing very little change in solar when my expectation would be that's where we want to be moving towards, and understanding what the constraints are that are in your study of why that isn't growing as much.
Yeah, and here's what I will say too. The study was not focused on the intermittent portions. Like it was what you see in that graph I think it's more important to focus on the bottom wedge because that's what was plugged into the life cycle cost analysis. Those two graphs are what the model selected based on the levelized cost of energy that was put in to the model and the system constraints. So we did take Hawaiian Electric's their planned land constrained DER 8760s or every hour of the day for a year, 870, 60 hour, their load profiles, and we plug that in, and the model selects the lowest cost resource. That the upper wedges, I think there's a lot of flexibility in that build out, if you will, but the focus of the life cycle cost analysis was really the bottom wedge. And regardless whether it's on the roof or, I mean, I showed the map for the assumption on the utility scale portion. We should be putting that as much into DER as possible. No argument. It's just a cost issue.
I really appreciate that clarification because I think that that does clarify what my concern was that I was poorly articulating. Right. Okay. Thank you.
I see a couple. I do want to address it. What effort is your office putting into studying local firm energy sources like geothermal and wave? So we are really focused on geothermal energy, but we have to do that very, there's a right process to do that. We have a geothermal energy working group. We are really trying to work with cultural advisors on getting sort of the regulatory guardrails right for geothermal. We do have a bill before the ledge. It is an admin bill to do more resource characterization. So step one for geothermal is just understanding geology. And happy to talk more on that, but in a very promising timeline that is a longer term. I'm hopeful it's our 2045 solution. But right now we have to sort of do the resource characterization first and really make sure that we get that development process right and work with the right people so we don't repeat history with geothermal development. Wave energy, that's a really expensive, the demonstration buoy that we have off Kaneohe Bay. It's breaking all the time, and they put a lot of money into that. So right now, that's just not a high TRL, not high technologically viable resource for us to look at, but that's really in R&D stages.
Renee, do you want to answer Marty's follow-up question?
Does you decide to start with this LNG idea now instead of, I think that's a question for my leadership. I don't think I can fully answer that question.
Thank you.
Yeah, but it's also discussed in depth, I think, in the report.
Great. Thank you, Monique. Others, if you have questions, please raise your hand. Cross, do we have any questions that are in the Facebook group or in the room? Ethan Hartley.
No, Chair, there's not.
Okay, great. Thank you, Cross. Hi, Ethan. You could introduce yourself and ask your question. Thank you.
Yeah, my name's Ethan. I'm a PhD student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Thank you for your presentation, Monique. I just wanted to clarify on some discussion with Kirsten about the figure on slide 12. Was the modeling decision here explicitly looking at a decision between LNG and LSFO, or was it a simultaneous and endogenous selection that allowed capacity for solar to take over in that capacity? So you're optimizing all of the capacities at once, or is the modeling decision just looking at the trade-off between LSFO and LNG?
So for the base case scenario, all assumptions held constant. Base case scenario, LNG was allowed, or sorry, for base case, LNG was not allowed to be selected in the model. Build case scenario, it was, but everything was held constant between the model runs.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. Any other questions from the audience? If so, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, and Cross, I think you confirmed there are no questions in the room. Monique, thank you so much for making time for us and answering our questions. I think we will probably continue to read more of the resources that you shared with us. For full transparency, we are continuing more presentations on this topic. So if the commission does have questions, are we free to email you directly? Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
of course. And,
Yes.
I moved into a different role where it is
Yes.
my kuleana to look at the very resources, the solar, wind, and, I am the person that did the analysis, but with the change in role, it's important that my work is primarily solar, the true renewable resources and our energy efficiency resources. So I would say just reach out to the office first. They may point you to me, but I really should be switching my time. And I spend most of my time, if not all of it, is no longer on this. Report.
I will follow up with you maybe separately, and if you could give me maybe a good person to generally reach out at the office. I know many people at the office, but who's the right one for this particular topic to then direct us? Yeah.
And hopefully too, just to be very candid, I think more information is going to be coming out, and I would encourage, engagement at the Public Utilities Commission when it becomes, in their purview, because they are ultimately the regulator.
Right. Great. Well, thank you again, Monique. We do really appreciate all this information you shared with us and your time. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Feel free to hang out for the rest of our meeting if you would like to. Okay, gang. We have one last presentation, item 5D, which is an update on our tourism and climate change guidance document. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Commissioner Olson and Vice Chair Otsuka for an update on that document.
Sure. Hi, everybody. So we have been pushing this out longer than Commissioner Olson and I would like to, but given our presentations from the Energy Office and then our sort of other presentations in February to sort of relate to this topic, we are now hoping to come back to you folks in March to review our internal revisions. So just a quick reminder, Commissioner Olson and I have been working on some internal revisions based on the draft that was given to us from commissioners who are no longer on the commission. So we'd like to share with you, it's mostly Commissioner Olson, but some really great revisions we've been making. We're just about wrapping that up, and we're excited to share with you folks. We'll take some comment from you folks in the public at that meeting as well. And then following that, we'll take about a month or two. So we're thinking April, May timeframe to engage with our stakeholder lists that you folks have reviewed last year with us. And now we're looking at a sort of earliest date, as long as it works with sort of the agenda, a June review of sort of the feedback we received, which feedback we chose to incorporate, and then for you folks to vote whether you'd like to approve the guidance document as POW, and then we can upload it to the website, or if you have additional revisions or we want to hold off on voting, that's also an option too. Commissioner Olson, did you want to add anything else regarding
No, I think
timeline?
that's our timeline. So we're excited. And for those of you who are familiar, this is a guidance note related to tourism and climate change, and both the impacts of tourists on climate change and impacts of climate change on our tourism economy.
Great. Well, thank you both. So we'll look forward to the June update.
March.
March and sorry,
Yes.
March,
Yes.
and then June. Yeah, great. Okay, moving on, if we can, to item 7, discussion our next tentative meeting dates. So in our original poll, we had scheduled February 27th, 9 to 11 as our original meeting date. But, you know, sort of as I shared earlier, we are going to be hearing more discussion on the alternatives fuel plan, varying perspectives. And so we want to ensure that we're kind of close to those meeting timelines from Monique's presentation from the State Energy Office. So I'd like to propose that our next February meeting would be instead February 13th from 1 to 4. I can't say we'll need all of that time, but it is intended to bring in 2 additional presenters on this topic, and then do some legislative discussion. So I just want to ask the commissioners if that day and time, February 13th, 1 to 4 p.m. continues to work for you. I see one. Great.
I
Commissioner
am
Romine?
not, yeah, I'm not available that
You're not
afternoon,
available.
unfortunately. Yeah.
Okay.
Not
Okay.
asking to switch. Morning would work if that's being
Yeah.
considered, but afternoon will not. I'm sorry.
Okay. Commissioner Osuka, we will still have quorum if we hold this meeting on the 13th from 1 to 4. Commissioner Ma has already told me that she is unavailable on that day.
I can't remember why we said we couldn't do the morning. I have a hold on my calendar, but I can't remember if it's for the commission meeting or something else.
Yeah. So if we did the morning, Commissioner Romine, you would be available.
I would be, yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Olson, would you be available if it was in the
I'm
morning?
available. Yep.
Okay. Okay. So Vice Chair Osuka, let's check our email threads with the various presenters to see if they are also available. Because if that's the case, that is my preference to have at least 4 commissioners present. For transparency, it will be a presentation on additional topics on the alternative fuels based on the state's plan. It will be a presentation from OCCSR on their legislative policy updates. And then we were intending to have a discussion on the commission's legislative interests and if we do choose to engage, what have you. So those are the topics for our February 13th meeting.
And I think to clarify for the group and the public, we're also hoping to have a 3-hour meeting again. So that would be either a 9 to 12 or a 1 to 4 o'clock meeting. Yeah.
So let us review the time and get back to everyone. But thank you for confirming availabilities for the morning and afternoon on the 13th. Director Fox, do you see any issue with that, with the office, if we were to do a meeting in the morning on the 13th?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, for checking. Right now I'm not seeing anything major, so the 9 to 12 block of time on the 13th seems to work well for CCSR.
Thank you. Commissioner Romine?
I also see a hold in our calendars on Friday the 27th. Would this be in addition to or rescheduling?
It would be a rescheduling. So we would cancel the meeting on the 27th of February.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so let us get back to you And then from there, we will have the office readjust the meeting hold that was sent out for the 13th. And then we'll cancel the one for the 27th. So your calendars can free up. Okay, great. Moving on to item 8, communication and correspondence from the public. We did not receive anything in advance, but given that we have a good portion of the public still remaining in our Zoom room, Facebook Live, and in person, is there any communication that you'd like to relay to the commission? Cross, do you see anything online or in the room?
Chair, there is none.
Great, thank you. I don't see anything in Zoom. And then item number 9, any items from the public that are not on our agenda? Cross, anything on your end?
No, Chair.
Great, thank you. Okay, number 10, announcements. Commissioners, any announcements that you would like to share with fellow commissioners, with the office and or the public? Commissioner Suga, I see that you've dropped something into the chat.
Oh, speaking of demand management, this is my monthly reminder about the state electric bike and electric moped rebate. So it's still happening. I'm hoping we can have a bigger rebate program after session. But at the moment, to qualify, you either need to not own a vehicle, qualify for one of the low-income programs such as SNAP, as well as or be enrolled in school, college, or university. I have the link there to the Hawaii Department of Transportation website with more information as well as the application. So you get a nice 20% off or up to $500 off your electric bike or electric moped rebate. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Olsuka, excuse me. Any other announcements from the group? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, everyone, for spending time with us this afternoon. It was an important topic. We look forward to continuing in February, and we will see you guys then. Call this meeting to adjourn at 3:37 p.m. Aloha.
Hello,
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners.
Thanks to our
Bye. Yep.
presenters. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Have a
guys,
good
for
weekend.
organizing. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Too.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.